I never thought the love of my life would become the man who destroyed me. I stood in the middle of the dimly lit café, my fingers trembling around the hot cup of coffee I hadn't touched. My eyes were locked onto the couple at the far end of the room, laughing, whispering, completely lost in each other. The world around me blurred, the sound of chattering voices and clinking glasses fading into a deafening silence. It was him, my ex-husband, the man who had vowed to love me forever, and the woman sitting across from him, my sister. A sharp pang shot through my chest, like a knife twisting into old wounds I thought had healed. 3 years had passed since he chose her over me, yet the sight of them together still felt like a fresh betrayal, ripping apart every piece of my soul I had desperately tried to mend. I wanted to walk away, to pretend I hadn't seen them, but I couldn't. My feet were rooted to the ground, my heart hammering in my chest as memories came rushing back like a tidal wave. Our wedding day, the promises, the whispered I love yous, that once felt unbreakable. And then, the lies, the deception, the night everything fell apart. I clenched my jaw, forcing back the sting of tears. They had taken everything from me, my marriage, my home, my sense of belonging, and yet, here they were, happy, as if my pain had never existed. But they weren't alone. I noticed a small figure beside them, a boy around 5 or 6 years old. His tiny hands clutched a toy car, his innocent eyes flickering between my sister and my ex-husband, his features so familiar. My breath hitched. No, it couldn't be. A storm of emotions raged inside me as realization dawned. My ex-husband had moved on, built a new life, a new family, and yet fate had cruelly placed us here, in the same space, forcing me to confront a truth I wasn't ready to face. He had abandoned me for her, and now he had a son. But just as I turned to leave, my heart shattering all over again, something unexpected happened. The little boy's gaze lifted, our eyes met, and in that single moment, everything changed. 3 years ago, I was a woman who believed in love, who believed in him. My name is Olivia Carter, and for 5 beautiful, blissful years, I thought I had the perfect marriage. James and I were the kind of couple people admired, the ones who seemed to have it all. We were best friends before lovers, partners in everything. We built a life together, home filled with laughter, stolen kisses in the kitchen, late night, conversations about dreams we hadn't yet achieved. I remember the exact moment I fell in love with him. It was a cold December night, and we had just left a friend's holiday party. I shivered as we walked through the city streets, snowflakes catching in my hair. James pulled off his scarf and wrapped it around me, his fingers brushing my cheek. "You're freezing," he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. "I'll always keep you warm, Liv, always." And I believed him. But love has a cruel way of disguising itself, hiding the cracks beneath a perfect surface, until, one day, it shatters. James was my husband, and Emily was my sister. Emily and I grew up inseparable. She was my first friend, my built-in support system, my other half. She was always the one people noticed first, lively, charming, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and have everyone gravitate toward her. I never minded. I was quieter, more reserved, content to let her shine while I stayed in the background. I never imagined she would betray me, but the signs were there. Looking back, I see them all too clearly, the stolen glances between them, the hushed conversations that stopped the moment I walked into a room, the way James began coming home later and later. I asked him once, "Are you happy?" It was a simple question, but his hesitation before answering was all the confirmation I needed. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself I was overthinking, that James loved me, that Emily could never do that to me, until the night I found out the truth. James wasn't working late. He wasn't stuck in traffic. He was with her. I still remember the way my heart pounded when I saw them, the way my breath caught in my throat. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, my stomach twisting as I watched them, his hand on the small of her back, her lips curving into a smile that should have been meant for me. When I confronted them, there were no lies, no desperate attempts to deny it. Just cold, brutal honesty. "We didn't mean for this to happen," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But James..." He just looked at me, expression unreadable, before saying the 5 words that crushed me completely. "I think I love her." That was the moment I knew. My marriage was over. The weeks that followed were a blur of heartbreak. Legal documents, and empty nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering where it all went wrong. My sister, my own flesh and blood, married him less than a year after our divorce. And now, standing in this cafe, watching them with their child, I realized something I never expected. I wasn't just looking at the man who had betrayed me. I was looking at his Suna boy, whose eyes reminded me of someone I once knew. Someone I never thought I'd see again. And in that moment, my past collided with my present in a way that would change everything. I should have walked away. I should have pretended I never saw them. But something inside me, some cruel, masochistic instinct, kept me rooted to the spot. The boy. He was fidgeting with a toy car, running its tiny wheels across the table, but my eyes were locked onto his face. His features, something about them, sent a shiver down my spine. The more I looked, the more an eerie familiarity settled in my chest. His dark brown eyes, the same shade as mine. My stomach twisted. No, it wasn't possible. It had to be a coincidence. Yet, as I continued to watch, something deep in my gut screamed otherwise. And then it happened. James leaned forward, ruffling the boy's hair. "Oliver," he said, his voice soft. "Do you want another cookie, buddy?" Oliver, dot the world around. Me tilted. "My name is Olivia." A wave of nausea crashed over me as my mind raced, struggling to piece together what my heart already knew. My pulse thundered in my ears as memories surfaced, memories I had buried. 3 years ago, after the divorce, I disappeared. Not literally, but emotionally. I packed my bags, left the city, and went into hiding from everyone who had ever known me. I couldn't bear the pitying glances, the whispered gossip about how my sister had stolen my husband. I started over in a quiet town hours away, drowning myself in work, and anything that kept me too busy to feel. But there was one more thing I did, one more secret I carried. I had been pregnant. My hands shook as I clutched the edge of the table for support. I had never told James. The day I found out, I had already signed the divorce papers. How could I have brought a child into that mess? So I made a choice, a painful, gut-wrenching choice. I lost the baby, at least, that's what I told myself. The doctors called it a miscarriage, but deep down, I always blamed my broken heart for it. So how? I watched as Emily reached out, gently wiping the boy's mouth with a napkin. He giggled, a sound so pure and innocent, it made my chest ache. I needed to get out of here. I needed air. But just as I turned to leave, James's eyes lifted and locked onto mine. For a moment, time stood still. His face went pale, his jaw tightening as if he had seen a ghost. He wasn't expecting me. And then Emily turned too. The color drained from her face as her eyes widened in shock. I was the last person she ever thought she'd see again. James said something to her, but I didn't catch it. My mind was spinning, my pulse erratic. I needed to get away before, "Excuse me, miss." A small voice. I froze. Slowly, I turned. Oliver was staring at me with those two familiar eyes, curiosity flickering in them. My breath caught in my throat. He smiled. "Why are you looking at me like that?" And just like that, the dam inside me broke. I had spent years healing from the betrayal. Years telling myself that James and Emily were my past, that they no longer had the power to hurt me. But fate had just thrown me into a nightmare I never saw coming, and I had a feeling this was only the beginning. I couldn't breathe. The café felt suffocating, the air thick with the scent of coffee and baked goods, yet none of it registered. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as Oliver continued to look at me, his innocent expression filled with curiosity. James and Emily were frozen, their faces mirroring the same shock that coursed through my veins. Did they think I was gone forever? That I had disappeared so far from their lives that our paths would never cross again? I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat felt like sandpaper. What could I even say? That I had been watching them, dissecting their lives from a distance, feeling a pain I had buried years ago. Emily was the first to recover. She reached for Oliver's hand, her voice unnaturally high. "Sweetheart, let's finish our snacks, okay?" But Oliver ignored her. My eyes were still fixed on me. "You look like someone I saw in a picture once." My breath hitched. James's posture stiffened. Emily's grip on her napkin tightened, knuckles going white. "A picture? What picture?" I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing my lips to part. "I'm sorry." My voice cracked. "I should go." I turned, my feet finally obeying me, but before I could take another step, "Olivia, wait." James's voice. That voice I hadn't heard in years. That voice that used to whisper promises in the dead of night, that once held warmth, but now carried an edge I didn't recognize. I stopped, my hands curled into fists at my sides. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. But James wasn't about to let me leave so easily. He stood, pushing his chair back with a quiet scrape. I heard his footsteps behind me. Too close, too familiar, too painful. "It's been a long time," he said, softer this time. I let out a bitter laugh, my shoulders tense. Not long enough. A silence stretched between us, heavy and unbearable. I could feel Emily's eyes boring into my back, the weight of her presence suffocating. "Olivia," James said again, his tone unreadable. "Can we talk?" I finally turned to face him. "Talk? About what?" My voice was sharper than I intended. "About how you threw me away like I was nothing. About how you married my sister before my side of the bed even got cold." James flinched. Emily's lips parted, but she quickly shut them, her eyes flickering to Oliver, who was watching the exchange with quiet confusion. James exhaled slowly. "It's not that simple." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "It never is it?" I should have walked away. I should have let him feel the sting of being ignored, the way I had felt it all those years ago. But something inside me something dark, something unresolved kept me rooted to the spot. Oliver. Who was he? Why did he look like me? And why did the mere sight of him make my heart ache with something I couldn't explain? James followed my gaze, his expression shifting, his jaw tightening, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Guilt it was, as if he knew exactly what I was thinking. Emily finally stood, stepping between us. "Olivia," she said, forcing a smile, that didn't reach her eyes. "It's been years. Maybe we can all just ... move on. Move on." I felt something snap inside me. Move on. As if she hadn't stolen my husband. As if she hadn't shattered me into 1,000 pieces and left me to pick them up alone. I took a deep breath, forcing the rage down. Not here. Not in front of the child. But my silence only seemed to make Emily more desperate. She stepped forward, lowering her voice. "Please, don't do this here." I frowned. "Do what?" James let out a breath. "Emily." She ignored him. "You showing up here? It's not a coincidence, is it?" Her words sent a chill down my spine. She thought I had planned this, that I had been waiting for the perfect moment to show up, to throw their past sins back in their faces. I clenched my jaw. "Trust me, Emily, I had no interest in seeing either of you again." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Oliver pulled on her sleeve, his small voice breaking through the tension. "Mommy, who is she?" And there, it was Mommy. The final blow. The knife that twisted so deeply, I felt my knees threaten to buckle. James noticed my reaction. I saw it in the way his brows furrowed. his lips parting as if realizing something for the first time. I needed to leave. Now, I turned on my heel and forced myself toward the door, every step feeling heavier than the last. But just before I reached it, James's voice stopped me one last time. Olivia, I need to tell you something. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to, because somehow, deep in the pit of my soul, I already knew, and the truth was about to destroy everything. I should have kept walking. I should have slammed that door behind me and never looked back. But something in James's voice, the urgency, the hesitation, the guilt made my body freeze. I turned, my heart hammering in my chest. What is it, James? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His gaze flickered toward Emily, who had gone stiff beside Oliver, her fingers gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. James exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. Not here. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Of course, because secrets should be told in private, right? Just like how you secretly destroyed my life. Emily grabbed his arm. James, don't, please. I looked between them, realization creeping in. She didn't want him to tell me. Something wasn't right. I stepped forward, my voice low. What are you hiding? James hesitated. His eyes flicked toward Oliver. My stomach dropped. No. My pulse roared in my ears. 1,000 fragmented thoughts racing through my mind, colliding and reshaping themselves into something that couldn't be possible. Could it? James took a shaky breath. Oliver isn't Emily's son. The floor vanished beneath me. I stared at him, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to comprehend what I had just heard. Emily's lips trembled. James, stop. But he didn't. He looked straight at me, his expression filled with something I had never seen before. Regret. He's yours, Olivia. Silence. Loud, crippling, deafening. I took a step back, my legs unsteady. What? The word barely escaped, barely formed, my lips numb as I said it. James swallowed hard. Oliver, he's our son. My knees nearly gave out. No, this couldn't be real. I shook my head. That's impossible. I lost the baby. My voice cracked, memories rushing in like a tidal wave. The pain, the heartbreak, the way the doctor had looked at me with sympathy when I lay in that hospital bed, believing that I had lost the last piece of the life James and I had built. James took a slow step toward me. You didn't lose him, Olivia. I gasped, a sob catching in my throat. That doesn't make sense. I was there. My words broke as I turned to Emily, her face pale, her body shaking. She wouldn't meet my eyes. A sickening feeling coiled in my stomach. What did you do? My voice was no longer weak. It was razor sharp, demanding. Emily inhaled sharply. Olivia, please, what did you do? Tears welled in her eyes as she finally looked at me. I had no choice. The room swayed. I pressed a hand to my chest, struggling to breathe. No choice. You stole my husband. And now you're telling me you stole my son too. Emily sobbed, covering her mouth. James's voice was pained. You were unconscious, Olivia. You were weak, and they thought you wouldn't make it. The doctors said the stress, everything you had been through, it caused complications. When you woke up, they thought it was best if you never knew. The walls of the café blurred around me. I felt like I was falling, drowning in a reality I never even knew existed. Emily finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom was the one who convinced the doctors not to tell you. Mom. A fresh wave of nausea hit me. James clenched his jaw. Your mother thought it would break you, Olivia. She was afraid you wouldn't recover if you knew your son was alive. I shook my head, violently. No, that's not true. My own mother wouldn't do that to me. She wouldn't. Emily's voice cracked. She gave him to me. She said I could raise him, that you'd never have to know. A strangled noise escaped my throat. You raised my son as your own. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. I turned back to Oliver, my vision swimming. He was still watching us, his big, innocent eyes filled with confusion. He had no idea. My son had no idea who I was. James reached for me, but I recoiled as if burned. My mind couldn't process it, none of it made sense. The years of grief, the nights spent crying over a child I thought I had lost, the overwhelming pain that had shaped me into the person I had become, and it had all been a lie. Emily stepped forward, desperation in her eyes. I love him, Olivia. I raised him. He's my son too. My hands balled into fists. No, he was never yours. You stole him from me. Emily sobbed harder. James closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging with something that looked like defeat. I turned back to Oliver, my entire body trembling. Does he know? My voice was hoarse, fragile. James shook his head. He thinks Emily is his mother. I looked at Oliver again, his tiny hands gripping his toy car, unaware that his entire world was about to change. Tears burned my eyes as my vision blurred. He should have been mine. His first steps, his first words, his first birthday. I had missed it all because of them, because of the people I had once loved and trusted more than anything. A sob wrenched through me as I finally turned away. I couldn't do this. I couldn't breathe. I needed to leave. I staggered toward the door, my heart shattering with each step. Olivia, wait, James called, but I didn't stop. I pushed the door open and stumbled into the cold night air, the sharp wind hitting my face, and for the first time in years, I screamed. I screamed for the years I had lost. I screamed for the son I never got to hold. I screamed for the betrayal that had destroyed everything I had ever known. And in that moment, standing under the cruel glow of the streetlights, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't over. I didn't know how long I stood there in the cold, my breath ragged, my mind spinning in a million directions. Oliver was mine, the child I had mourned, the baby I had wept over, thinking he was gone forever. He had been alive this whole time, growing up under the care of the very people who had betrayed me. James, Emily, my own mother. How could they? How could they look me in the eyes all those years ago and let me believe my child had died? The cafe door swung open behind me, but I didn't turn. Olivia, please, James said, his voice filled with an emotion I couldn't place. I know this is a lot, but you need to hear us out. I let out a shaky breath, my arms wrapped tightly around myself. Hear you out. After everything you've done, you lied to me, you stole my son from me, and now you expect me to just listen. James sighed heavily. I didn't know the truth at first either. Your mother told me you lost a baby, just like she told you. It wasn't until later, when Emily told me the truth, that I realized what had happened. I finally turned, my eyes burning with tears. And what did you do, James? Did you come find me? Did you tell me my child was alive? He flinched. I laughed bitterly. That's what I thought. Emily appeared behind him, her face streaked with tears. Olivia, I swear to you, I never wanted to hurt you. I loved him from the moment I held him. I know that doesn't justify what I did, but I did everything I could to raise him right. A sharp pain twisted in my chest. She got to hold him. She got to love him. I should have been the one to see his first steps, to kiss his scraped knees, to tuck him in at night, and yet, she had taken all of that from me. I shook my head, my voice breaking. You had no right. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. I know. I inhaled deeply, trying to steady myself. Does he know? Emily hesitated before shaking her head. No. My breath hitched. James took a cautious step forward. We wanted to tell him, when he was older. We didn't know how to do it without hurting him. I scoffed. So, what? You were going to let me live my whole life believing he was gone. James ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tightening. No, I wanted to tell you, Olivia. I swear I did. But I was afraid. You left. You disappeared. And when I finally had the courage to look for you, it was too late. Too much time had passed. Coward. That's what he was. A coward who had chosen the easy way out, while I suffered. I exhaled shakily. I need time. Emily nodded, tears still spilling down her face. I understand. James opened his mouth to speak, but I had nothing left to give. I turned and walked away, feeling the weight of their stares burning into my back. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what to do. All I knew was that everything in my life had changed in an instant. 2 weeks. Letary stood outside the house, my hands shaking as I stared at the front door. For the past 2 weeks, I had been drowning in emotions, rage, grief, longing. I had spent hours staring at my reflection, trying to reconcile the woman I had become with the girl I used to be. And through it all, one thought haunted me. Oliver is mine, no matter how much time had passed, no matter how much had been taken from me. That simple truth remained. I couldn't erase the years I had lost. I couldn't undo the lies, but I could fight for my son. Taking a deep breath, I knocked. The door opened, and there he was, Oliver. He looked up at me, his big brown eyes filled with curiosity, just like they had been in the café. I forced a smile. "Hi, Oliver." He tilted his head. "Hi." My heart pounded. Behind him, James and Emily appeared, their faces tense but expectant. I didn't acknowledge them. This moment wasn't about them. It was about him. I crouched down so we were at eye level. "Can I tell you a story?" Oliver hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay." I took a deep breath, my voice trembling but steady. Once upon a time, there was a mommy who had a baby boy, and she loved him more than anything in the whole wide world. But one day, something really bad happened, and she lost him. She didn't know where he was, and it made her really, really sad. Oliver blinked. "Did she find him?" Tears stung my eyes. I smiled softly. "She's trying." Oliver studied me, something shifting in his little face. "That's a good story." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, it is." He smiled. "Can you tell me another one?" A tear slipped down my cheek, and for the first time in years, I felt something inside me begin to heal. I nodded. "I'd love to." And just like that, my story wasn't over. It was only just beginning.